This conference will now be recorded.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I know we've got a few people still joining us, so we'll just go ahead and get started with some introductions and some basic overall virtual meeting protocols, which I'm sure everybody's quite familiar by now, since we've been doing this for about almost a year solid on the virtual meetings. But my name is Austin Mount. I'm with the Emerald Coast Regional Council. And I just want to introduce some of your team that's here with you today with the Emerald Coast Regional Council. As you guys know, we are hosting this workshop on behalf of the Department of Economic Opportunity. With me, I've got Ada Clark on as well. She's going to help do backup in case my connection goes down on the facilitation side. We've got Brittany Ellers. She's going to help run us through the poll everywhere and technology. And then we've got Mary Jo Gustave on as well, who's additional technology backup to try to make this workshop go as smooth as we possibly can. So we've checked all the boxes. But again, if those of you that are new to virtual meetings, if you're joining us, if you would, please just go ahead and mute yourselves if you haven't already. And I think the instructions here are on the board. And if you want, and you're familiar with the poll everywhere, you can go ahead and get logged in at this point in time. You'll have another opportunity to get logged in with the poll everywhere right before we start. But at this point in time, I want to introduce Sean Lewis, who's with the Department of Economic Opportunity. And Sean, thank you for being here today. And also Katie Smith, who is with the Department of Economic Opportunity and who is leading the Florida Broadband Initiative. And also just thank everybody for joining us on this workshop. This workshop is a very preliminary step in determining what the broadband needs are across the different regions of Florida, in hopes that we can provide Katie some type of ammunition to present to the legislature and move towards a full strategic plan and some outcomes that will be favorable for Florida. So at this time, I'll just turn it over to Katie. And thank you all for joining us. And Katie, the floor is yours. And you are muted, Katie, I think.
Okay. Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you participating in the Florida Broadband Workshop today. And I'm hoping that these workshops are going to be very fruitful, especially today's. These workshops are being hosted by the Department of Economic Opportunity in partnership with our Florida Regional Planning Councils. My name is Katie Smith. I am the Director for the Office of Community Partnerships for the Florida Office of Broadband here at the Department of Economic Opportunity. I'll be your host today, along with my colleague, Sean Lewis, Program Manager for the Office of Community Partnerships at DEO. I really want to thank our friends and partners at the Emerald Coast Planning Council for facilitating today and collecting the information and comments that are gathered here during our conversation. We appreciate the technical assistance, the invitations that you sent out, everything that you have at this point in time. The comments that you provide today are really important to us, so please speak up. We genuinely want to hear from you. I know I've heard from many of you, but anything that you can add today would be very helpful. So I have been with the Department of Economic Opportunity for the last 6 years, and I've worked in business development with large companies relocating and expanding in Florida, as well as small and rural communities in their economic development. I began working to establish the Office of Broadband less than a year ago. And today, our conversation on broadband is going to focus on accessibility and what the current status of broadband is in your region for your industry sector and how you define broadband expansion. You are identified as a leader in your sector, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Okay, next slide, please. So during the legislative session of 2020, House Bill 969 established the Office of Broadband at DEO to increase availability and effectiveness of broadband internet throughout the state. especially in small and rural communities. The bill also authorized DEO to access federal grant dollars to assist communities with expansion of broadband services. And we're currently staffed by existing resources in the Office of Community Partnerships at DEO. The Office of Broadband has been incredibly fortunate to have the support and commitment of fantastic partners, such as the Florida Regional Planning Councils, the Florida Association of Counties, the Small Counties Coalition, Florida Internet and Television, state agencies such as the Department of Transportation, Department of Health, Department of Education, and many, many others. Next slide, please. So per Section 364.0315 of the Florida statutes, the office has been provided 4 main directives. These include creating a strategic plan to increase the use of broadband service, facilitating local technology planning teams, which is exactly what we're doing here today, and encouraging the public use of the internet service through different broadband grant programs, as well as monitoring and participating in FCC communication, the communications proceedings. Next slide, please. So to meet the directives of the statute, DEO has adopted a 4-phase approach. So the first phase is a feasibility study to specify the nature of the connectivity gap and why it exists. And to do that, in 2020, DEO submitted an application to the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration with a request for $3 million to fund this particular study. We were notified in the fall of 2020 that we were not awarded funding. However, we have had a lot of help from our partners, and the office has requested broadband studies and plans and projects that are being completed currently in the region, county, or the community, and at what level you are working on your project, and that helps us identify what your current status is of broadband so that we can add that into our strategic plan. The second phase is to create that strategic plan for broadband that's the office has begun outlining this plan. We are looking forward to aggregating all of the information that we get from these workshops that are going to be continuing this week and next. And we'll add that information to our outline of our strategic plan. We're also going to add a link to a survey, which the questions here that you are going to be answering for us today and we will be discussing will also be linked to our website for public input. And that information will also eventually go into our strategic plan as well. Today we have gathered different sectors, 13 different sectors for the office to chat with about these this availability and accessibility, and we're looking really forward to hearing what you have to say. The third phase of that plan finally is the implementation of the initiatives in the strategic plan, and upon the completion of the plan, we'll be looking to identify other resources to assist in that implementation. Next slide, please. We have also been creating and building our Office of Broadband website that houses information on federal and state funding opportunities for broadband. We regularly update this site, including information on the workshops. And soon, again, we will have that link for public comment. One recent development you may have heard about is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, or RDOF, from the FCC. This is $191 million that was awarded to Florida entities. The FCC has provided a summary of that auction by county with the bidders within those counties. You can access that link for more information on our website. It's important to note that, however, that the DEO does not have a role in determining who gets what or how the funds can be utilized. So to prepare for, go back a slide for me. So to prepare for the possible grant funding through DEO in the future, priority will go to these two proposals for projects that highlight the following ideas that you can see here on our slide. So we have to look at what projects are going to try to remove those barriers to entry for underserved areas. We're going to look at encouraging local and regional investment, and then whatever projects address the needs of those that have been exposed during the pandemic, specifically remote working, telemedicine, distance learning. And then finally, the Office of Broadband is continuing to monitor broadband development activity throughout the FCC. And we look at those on a weekly basis. Okay, next slide. So you'll also find on the office website a map highlighting internet speeds by census block. The state of Florida minimum internet download speeds uses FCC data. And since January of 2015, the FCC has defined broadband internet download speeds greater than 25 megabits per second, or Mbps, and upload speeds of 3 megabits per second. We chose to present the FCC data a little differently. And because of this, one of our goals is to focus on the underserved and unserved areas. And we chose to highlight the census blocks with that minimum download speed or less. So anything on our website that you see will be 25.3 or slower, not anything 25.3 or higher. So you'll see that unserved would be someone that an area or a census block that is not receiving that 10.1. Underserved is and then progressively up to 25.3. So we assume that if you have 25.3, you meet that expectation for the FCC standards. We just want to also note that the data for the map is provided by the FCC from June of 2019. The data is for fixed internet service only. It does not include satellite and mobile data. And we really encourage you to take a look at it for your community. I always enjoy taking a look at it. I really do. I go and I look at different communities that around the state as we talk to them and get a feel for where they are. Next slide, please. So today is the third of our broadband workshops being conducted in partnership with the Florida Regional Councils Association. The 10 regional workshops are being hosted by DEO and facilitated by the planning councils, and everything will be completed by February 12th, so next Friday. The workshop participants include a variety of sector leaders from different industries, including education, healthcare, local government, tourism, and you can see all of them listed on the slide here. And after the workshops are completed, the Regional Councils Association will aggregate the information and the testimonies from the workshop participants and will provide that to DEO no later than February the 15th. Okay, so let's get to it. I'm going to switch it over to Brittany here, or to Austin, and let you guys discuss how this poll everywhere will work.
Yeah, I'll definitely let Brittany handle this. This is her area of expertise. So Brittany, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to use Poll Everywhere, but it's kind of fun. It's interactive. You get to see the results live on the screen of what your peers are putting in as their responses. So really all you have to do is either go to this website and you should automatically be entered into our activity today, or you can participate via phone text message. So if you text Gold Leaf 599 to the number 22333, you should get a response back saying that you are in our activity. And then once we reach that slide, you can submit your response for that slide. All of our slides have the responses are correlated with a letter, sorry. So just put in the letter that corresponds with whatever response that you're trying to give us. That way we can aggregate that data a little better. And sometimes when people enter full words, it can kind of skew it. So just the letter is all we need, A, B, C, D. Some of them have many letters. So that's really the run of it. If anybody has any questions or any trouble getting on the activity, please let me know and I'll do my best to assist you. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to you guys unless there's anything else I need to say.
Yep. Brittany, I just want to say real quick, when you do log in, you'll get a text message back that says, welcome to Stephanie Height's session. That is the correct session. We are all sharing, all the councils are sharing one account. So you're in the right one if you get Stephanie Height. That's a
Okay, so do we have a sample, a test question, Brittany?
Yes, we have a quick test question. It might be a little controversial, but it's just chocolate or vanilla, and you can submit your responses.
For me, it's a no-brainer, but so this is just a good opportunity for you to just make sure that everything is working correctly. Once you've submitted it, looks like we clearly have a winner. I'm all about it. I love me some chocolate, so that is great. So that while you are doing your test question, I just want to follow up here. We have 8 questions that will help the Office of Broadband in understanding regional availability and accessibility of broadband internet service. These questions will also assist in the design of state programs and resources for broadband adoption, deployment, expansion, and resiliency. The information shared today will be used in the development of the strategic plan. And again, there's only 8 questions, so hopefully this should be pretty easy. So let's go to that next slide here. The very first question is, which sector are you completing this survey from? You were invited based on the wonderful work that you do every day. So if you could just help us out and give us an overview so we know what coming from. I appreciate that very much. Okay, looks like we've got a good mix of different government agencies. We've got a good mix from education and private businesses and economic development. That's fantastic. Thanks so much. So our next question is going to be, in which county is your place of business located? It doesn't look like the right counties for our area.
yeah, we have an issue there.
Yes, I apologize. If we can come back to this question later, I can fix this really fast on the back end. I apologize. I did not look through this list. Somebody else did this. I should have checked it first. I apologize again. So if you want to just move on to the next one, I'll fix this.
All right. No problem. We'll come back to that. So I'm also, the next thing that I'm asking is, I would like to know, are you aware of any existing local broadband studies in your area? What does that look like to you? Do you have something that you have already done in the last few years? Is this something that that your area is working on? Are you aware of any? We would love to know your answer for that. Don't know if those answers are going through. There we go. Fantastic. So it looks like a good bit of you are familiar with different broadband studies in your area. I will say from the different studies I have received so far, this particular area is one of the areas around the state that we have gotten a lot of feedback from. So that's fantastic. Okay, so let's go to question 4 here. And this is really where we start getting into the conversation where those are really just housekeeping questions, but these going forward, the next 3 or 4 are very specific to you and the accessibility piece. So of the following factors, which is the most important regarding broadband internet accessibility? And I'm really curious specifically for your area, because I know there are some urban areas, but for the most part, this is a pretty rural planning councils, a rural region. So let's see what is out there and what's important to you. I know that a lot of times we heard from our last conversation was cost. Cost was a major factor, and that's important to hear. And we know that is one of those things. But I'm curious if there's anything else. Does anyone have any comments on that, or any thoughts initially from our industry?
Hey, this is Bart Siders from Escambia County. So when I look at that list, I mean, we're in the middle of doing a broadband feasibility study. Actually, just got it back, and then now we're going a little bit further to actually do some design and engineering pieces. And one of the biggest thing is just accessibility as a whole. So we've got some areas that really have no accessibility to whether it's reliable, fast, or cost effective. It's just they really don't have anything. So that's one of the underserved, I guess, is the way you've got it in one of your other slides. So that's something that to me is very key, at least for our community. We've got the northern end of our territory really doesn't have a lot of options. And if they do, it's very expensive and very slow.
Okay, well, that's good to know. That is very good to know. Anyone else have a comment on this, on these factors?
Yeah, I'll just add it on top of the very costly and very slow, it's also very unreliable in a lot of places. So, I mean, it is accessibility. That is the bigger factor. I mean, it doesn't matter how reliable it is if you don't have it.
Sure, I appreciate that, Richard. Thank you for responding. So
this is
hi.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is Henry Martin, and I'm gonna jump on that also. It's accessibility in Walton County, in the northern end of the county. That is the major issue. It's not the speed or reliability. It's just having access. Period.
Okay. Okay. Well, so these are really good comments, and I'd like to flip over to the next question, because I think we can expand on this, and I'd be interested to hear from you in the next two questions. So this one is, what type of internet technology are you currently utilizing through your service provider? And this is going to be really important so that we have an idea of where you are now and where you're going to go in the future, what the plan is.
Do you mean for our organization, or do you mean
for your industry sector? Yeah, so going forward for your industry sector, when we get to, we're trying to keep it out of the residential piece for this conversation. I know that might get a little tricky. But one of the reasons I asked is because I'm curious what that difference is when we start getting that industry or that residential conversation going via the website. So it looks like everybody's using fiber. So I'm going to flip one more, and then I'd really like to get into more conversation. So the next question here is, what type of internet technology would increase the accessibility for those you serve? And if somebody could kind of open that up for discussion, I would love to hear from you.
Yes, this is one we really need to hear from folks.
So this is Bart Siders with Escambia County again. So I think I guess you got to start with a backbone. And so, when we think about it from what our feasibility study came back and said is, you got to build a backbone, because that's why we don't have a lot of underserved, or that's why we have a lot of underserved areas, is because there's no backbone fiber going out there to serve them. So, I think the backbone's got to be there, and most people are doing that via fiber. And then, like through our study, our north end people, we would do it through wireless to get to the residential piece. We could hit about 3,000 to 5,000 people using wireless. And so it's kind of, to me, I would love to be able to answer this both ways, D and E almost together.
No, Bart, I think that's a good point, because in our previous conversations in workshops, we've heard that it's going to take different technologies to really expand broadband on many, many levels. And it's good to hear that you are already thinking about that for Escambia County, that it's going to be different types of technologies. Are there any other counties that are looking at multiple technologies, or are you looking at one specifically?
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is Henry Martin in Walton County again. Back to the same point, we had already run fiber to our schools that went all the way to the Alabama border, basically down to the ocean. And what we're doing now is we're using a wireless setup, and we are actually getting 100 megabits to every household in the north end of the county, and we'll spread all the way to the south end. So that it's basically the same type setup. We're in our first phase of doing that in the very far north end. And like you said, you have to have that infrastructure first before you can even do the wireless and set up meshing and different things like that.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Richard. Go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say, we've got, when you look at where the fiber optic's running, we've got an amazing amount of fiber optic that runs through here. The problem is tapping into it in a lot of places. I mean, I knew of a business that had fiber optic running right by their front door, and yet they could barely get DSL. So, when we look at this, yeah, I mean, I agree. You've got to have the backbone, but I'm thinking about the cost and everything of reaching out in the remote areas, especially wireless is it. You're not running fiber to every single household in this area, I don't think, with the money that we've got available.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah, Katie, this is Brad. One thing as part of Florida Internet Television, we participated in the MCOR's projects in our industry, which are typically your major cable providers, Cox, Comcast, Charter, Mediacom, and Atlantic Broadband. We totally agree that it will be a multiple of technologies that will reach this last 4% of Florida. So, I'll echo, some of the previous comments that, that point-to-point wireless is going to be probably today's in play and in practice solution. But obviously there's the new technologies that are coming out, and as an industry, we know it's going to take all technologies that are out there to reach these folks.
So I'm curious, this is Katie, I'm curious how would you, this community, this region, what would be helpful for you to be able to expand that? What would be helpful, whether it's from a cost perspective, or I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on how to do that?
Well, our counties are, and this is Richard, so from the rural side of the fence, our counties are broke. I mean, money is not there for them to participate, and that's going to be part of the challenge. I mean, we've got a few that can do it, but coming up with the funds is the big deal. And on the other side of the fence, if I'm a provider, you've got to figure out a way to cover your costs and make some money. So money seems to be the biggest issue standing in our way everywhere I go.
Okay. Sean, do you have any questions?
Actually, I was thinking about this, and I think the way I'd like to ask this question is, in terms of, I hate this phrase, but it really gets to the point, low-hanging fruit. If funds were made available today, what would be, throughout the region, what would be your first investments to have the most immediate impacts? What would you look to do with that money?
Final mile for me. I mean, we seem to have plenty of fiber running all over the place here. We just don't have a way to connect to the individual houses and businesses that are not, that are outside of a city center.
Okay.
I think we're going to have to, this is Chris Doolan, I think you're going to have to work very closely with the market, and by the vendor and providers. I mean, they're the ones that are going to have the key to it, and they need to be assured that they're going to be able to have their costs offset so it's affordable before they even are willing to go into it. Brad, I'm glad you're on the call. I think when we get into all this, it's going to be the providers that are very much driving the train, and from the standpoint of the users, we've got to find a way to identify where those gaps are, what exists, and what providers are there that are going to be willing to step into the gap and use what currently exists, either enhancing or expanding or that. So I think a dialogue with the providers, and I know on an individual basis, county by county, there are some things going on, but it's going to be, I think it's going to obviously be the providers are going to, and we ought to understand that. I mean, they're the ones in the business, and if we're going to be successful, then we've got to create the incentives to either offset their costs or allow them to expand. That's all I've got to say, really.
Thank you, Chris. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. And hopefully we'll be able to, see something come to fruition.
Hey, Katie.
Yeah.
This is Christy Mason with Lumen Technologies. CenturyLink is one of our brands. And going off of the ideas, if funds were available tomorrow, one of the quick ways from service provider perspective would be is if there was a grant program at the state level, using the updated maps that are coming out of DEO and also from the FCC, targeting areas that providers are able to expand our network. And by tapping into a broadband grant program, we'd be able to do it at a more economical way.
Okay. Thank you, Christy.
This is Chris Walker with T-Mobile, and I know we always talk about money, and obviously money is very important, but I can tell you from our perspective, the number one gap isn't so much funding, but the permitting and and not trying to throw anybody under the bus or say, but just the difference in permitting or the lack of clarity on where we can go or what the what the fee, what the process is if something's deemed approved. There's just a lot of ambiguity in there that all adds up and tends to really hinder our own deployment. So there are places that we've been trying to go. It's like, hey, what do y'all need to get out there? Like, we've been trying to get there out there for 2 years. So I know money's great, but just continue that would be, and I know that's the other people's experience too. That's a big barrier.
Okay, great.
Katie, this is Dwayne in Washington County. We have DOE and everyone else, every time something comes around, people's answer, jetpacks or whatever, but in our county, we got about 25% of our students do not have access to any infrastructure, wireless or some cable or any sort like that. So that's where, like Escambia and some of the earlier have said, the rural areas, I started to type in a while ago, a 0.5 on your directives ought to be the infrastructure, should be our very first thing that we deal with, because there's nothing there, like Escambia said a while ago, there's nothing to build off of. So that's where we all in these rural counties fall into that category. Then if something is there, is it affordable? We did also listen to, as Chris just mentioned, from T-Mobile, when you look at their maps of any of our wireless providers, they show a lot of access in the areas, but as I say, we can carry whatever radio signal we want around the county, and we find still about 25% of our students don't have access.
Katie, there are some questions in the chat box. I'm not sure if they've been answered yet, but so you could take a look at them as well.
Let's take a look. So some of the questions we have Dave Merzen. Are you assuming that an assessment of current capabilities has been done in each county? I don't know. I don't know what has been done in your counties. So a current assessment would be fantastic, but I don't know, because I know that there are, and I see that some counties might not have started a needs assessment yet. And that's correct. And that's kind of where we're going, Dave, was just to get an idea of who has started this and who hasn't. And maybe that will be something that the state can assist with. And who knows, in the future, maybe that's something that we can assist with building those feasibility studies just within each county. And maybe that helps answer your question.
Katie, this is Brad. Just one piece on Representative Mersen's, former Representative Mersen's comments is just last week, the FCC, or excuse me, Congress approved funding. So they spent 1.5 years figuring out how to change from the old census block mapping to a granular level, where is service actually provided on a methodology for that. Then they went to Congress and asked for the money, and just last week, Congress and the president approved the funds for that mapping. So just as a federal piece to tie in with your local plans, is that, you know, when you talk about a needs assessment or a gap assessment, the feds are going to begin granular mapping of the entire United States, including Florida, obviously, and that will aid local counties in their plans. So stay tuned for that. I know the FCC is they seem very forward stance on getting that going. So I'm happy to report back when we see what they're doing.
Excellent. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that, that information for our communities. Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments that you would like to add to this?
So Katie, this is Bart Sider again at Scambia. But you know, one of the things I thought was really interesting is we went through the feasibility study, and it kind of goes along with what a lot of the comments you've heard is, you know, somebody asked about the money, you know, if there was money available, what would you do? And I think somebody said serve the underserved, because a lot of the folks that in that rural county or the underserved area are very limited in their funds that they have. So you've got to be able to give them, you know, something that's very, very affordable, but can still get, you know, so the kids can do their homework and all the things during this pandemic. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing I thought was real interesting when we got back our feasibility study is, you know, when you look at the FCC 477 map for our area, you know, you see a lot of speeds that, you know, everybody, the FCC says are 1 gig or better. And that's because of the way they do that map is, you know, just one, as long as one customer in that area gets 1 gig, then you can map that whole area as 1 gig. But when we went out and did the study and asked our people, you know, our constituents to actually fill out a study to see what they actually do and do a test, most of those in that area were only getting a 25.3 broadband or less. So even though it shows, you know, a big portion of ours is 1 gig available, it's not really truly available. So I think that's it. The big thing is you got to give them the bandwidth they need at a very affordable price. Is to me, if we could somehow figure out a way to do that, you know, if I had all the money in the world, that's what we would try and do right now. That's why we focused our feasibility study and our next engineering study will go into really trying to get, how do we serve the underserved at a very reliable and low cost way to get them up to at least 100. I think we're trying to shoot for like 150, 100 down, 15 up, you know, kind of thing is kind of our goal.
That's wonderful. That's ambitious and fantastic. I'm impressed that the goal is so high. That's wonderful. Good for you for doing that. Does RPC have any questions for our community? Sean also had a question.
Well, I just had a point that the point that was just made was really well taken. That's actually why we set up our map the way we did. We wanted to show that we wanted to show minimums rather than maximums, because that tells a better story about what the real need is.
Mm-hmm. I agree, Sean. I agree.
You know, Katie, this is Henry, and I guess Escambia and I are kind of doing about the same thing, and I want to reiterate what he said about those maps. We did an evaluation on our county, And all of those existing FCC maps were not even close to being correct. So really, that was ridiculous even looking at those. Well, once we did our own, we found out all our demarcs, we found out everything that was in our county. We were then able to set up a plan and really go from there, because the existing maps that the FCC has are not even close to being correct. So highly recommend that everybody do that. If you really want something that's going to be legitimate and really help you moving forward. And the other thing about these speeds, we are also doing 100 megabits minimum. 25.3 has been around for a long time, and you have to understand the technology. Just give you an example, 4K television, when they stream, that's 20 megabits just itself. So 25.3 to me, planning forward, is really not enough. And I think we're really going to do our users of our counties a disservice to think that 25.3 in the next year or two is going to be sufficient.
That's a really great point. And
that's an interesting point.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
that's
Sean.
been made there during this pandemic period where you have everyone working from home. You've got students working from home. It's really not sustainable at that low level.
Brad, do you have a comment on that by chance?
Yeah, I think, shooting for higher speeds is, I think, for everybody, including my members, where majority of my members which are in urban and suburban areas, shoot for a gig. I think it's all a good cautionary tale that when you're chasing federal dollars, you look at what their formula is, which will be, and unless they raise it, it's currently 25.3. So I think both goals and aspirations and hard work on deploying networks that are larger than that and faster than that, I think is laudable. But I also think that when we look at chasing federal dollars, and if we're going to compete for a federal with some kind of state or local match and some kind of program along those lines, the feds will be looking at that criteria for unserved, or if you're below that but still connected, considered underserved. So we're all about all the technologies coming together to reach these last folks. I just think we need to keep that in mind when we're competing against places like Arizona, New Mexico, West Texas, where there's literally 100 miles with zero service. And Florida, while we do have significant challenges in our rural area, we have a dense rural area compared to those areas. Now, they did do set-asides for Indian reservations and things like that in the recent federal grant, but there are minority communities that are still trying to be reached that far outpace Florida's rural competition. So I just think we need to make sure once we're chasing those federal dollars, we're all rowing the boat in the same line, and that's why DEO is doing what you're doing.
Katie, I have just kind of a follow-up. Can the economic development folks that are out there, I know Richard has spoken, but Nathan, are there any issues that as you're trying to recruit companies, or is Cindy Drummond on from the medical from Santa Rosa? If we could get some feedback from you guys of what your issues are, or what your issues have been identified by the folks that you serve or are trying to recruit to the state.
Thanks, Ada. That was a really good question. If we can flip to the next slide, I think we actually touch on that piece, which is what is the greatest challenge or barrier concerning broadband internet faced by your community? And so maybe we can get some feedback there, and that'll help answer that. I love watching these numbers pop in. They just go, it's just like this little flow of numbers and responses. So it does look like the lack of internet service providers far outweighs anything else. And Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just don't remember what the other two communities or the other two councils and regions have come up with for this particular question. I know that cost is a factor, and I know that was very prevalent in the previous workshops. I think this is the first workshop that we've seen where population density and lack of service providers is the biggest one. Am I wrong on that, Sean?
I think that's right. I think cost has been the big one so far.
So can I toss this over to, I'm sorry, Sean.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Can I toss this over to some of our service providers? Would they be able to maybe speak to this question?
On behalf of our members, I can say that, the population density is a direct correlation to service provision. Unlike some of those point-to-point wireless technologies that we talked about earlier in the call, where those providers seek to serve those more rural markets where they can reach that with their sort of stuff. Our members typically are targeting a higher density population. It's already been discussed on this call, but I will say where those urban and suburban areas are, the one thing that the reason cost, as we saw in the previous call, Katie, was a big one is to mitigate that. Our members offer a low cost internet program for families on free and reduced lunch for everybody in the household to use it. So while a majority of this call obviously is seeking to solve the greater rural connectivity problem, it's just a reminder to everyone out there that where there is access, the members do step up. And if your schools or school districts have a head count that is in an urban or really a suburban marketplace, they do have access, please don't forget about informing those communities about that connectivity, because they're good programs and they go a long way to helping connect folks that don't necessarily have the means to do a full cost internet program.
Hi, Katie. This is Jack Burge from Lumen CenturyLink. One thing I wanted to call out, because this is the second call I've been on, the questions are a little misleading in that some of the attendees are users, some of them are providers. So the user, when they talk cost, it's internet, and from a provider perspective, it's the cost of building the network. As the last speaker just mentioned, from a provider perspective, cost, population density, and the resultant speed that can provide at a economic cost are all interrelated. The other thing I'll mention, and I think was indirectly touched on, is the federal stimulus bill will be rolling out later this month, the low income, where low income users can get a $50 credit on their bill. So thanks.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. Thank you. Does anyone else have, I'm sorry.
Yes, this is Renee Roundtree. I'm the library director for Washington County. I think that you might on C as that answer, it's not necessarily a lack of internet service providers, it's sometimes limited options. A lot of times our library patrons who are coming in to use our fiber connection, it's because the option is so limited, it's not feeding the need that they currently have. So they just elect not to have it because of data caps, or they just can't afford the speed that they necessarily have, or where they live, that speed is just not an option at all. So they just elect to reallocate their money somewhere else, like gas to get to their local public library, to use the fiber connection.
Okay, that's great insight. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great feedback.
And thank you for being on with the libraries. I appreciate that. I think you're the first one I've had at my workshop, so thank you.
Mhm.
Is there anyone else?
We're really interested in the sector perspectives. Really glad that the library spoke up, because we also want to hear, the healthcare providers. Are there specific issues that you have? We want to make sure that we are hearing from all of you with your very unique needs.
Okay, are there any other questions that we could try to answer, or that you'd like to, any other points that you would like to discuss today?
I would like to mention something else. It's Renee again. I do want to thank the service providers. I have spent the better part of 7 years as a library director attempting to be able to afford cost-effective fiber for my library locations. I would diligently put out an E-rate form every year, but 2 years ago, it actually became feasible for me to actually have fiber at all 4 of my library locations. So it's great. And then I've put out my 470 again for this coming year that starts July 1. And I am amazed at the cost is going down and it's becoming more and more affordable for a library, which is good news. I mean, even though I'm reimbursed to a huge degree, the reality of it is the initial investment an outlay was not something that our library budget could originally afford to do. So thank you guys.
I just want to say thank you for mentioning that. This is Brad, and I was at one of your libraries when you cut the ribbon on some new connectivity that was supplied by Charter, which is one of our members on their Spectrum platform. So thank you for mentioning that. But I know our members are committed to, as an interim solution, getting to those libraries as much as they can. But thank you so much for mentioning that.
Thank you, Renee. That was fantastic. Renee, what county are you in?
I'm in Washington County.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts for the group today?
Katie, this is Henry in Walton County again, and I want to talk about the E-rate a little bit. As a few people have mentioned, it is a huge benefit, not only to education, but it also can be used, as we did in Walton County. After we ran fiber to all our schools, the county came in afterwards. They didn't use our money, but they actually used the last mile to the fiber that we had run, which saved them millions of dollars and running fiber to these other locations. Then why I say that is, as a community, we need to work together. When we did our infrastructure build, it was the school district, it was the county commissioners, the sheriff's office. You've got to bring your resources together and work together as a team to be able to put the infrastructure in your county and be able to do it in a way that is advantageous for not only the businesses, the schools, and all users. It was a tremendous win for our county to be able to do that and to build out an infrastructure that we're still doing today, but we're all working together, and that was the key to make it possible.
Henry, I think that's a great point that you bring up. We at DEO have seen a lot of projects come to fruition and have been the most successful when communities partner and work together as a collective for whatever that that focus is. Excuse me, for their project. Getting choked up. And we have seen the best projects and the most successful ones come out of that. And I know that Sean, who has been with our rural communities for many years, has seen that as well. And I'm sure our planning council has seen that. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that that definitely it can add sometimes a level of stress, but I think that in the end, it definitely adds to the success and that comes from those projects.
Absolutely. That was a really great point that was brought up. In my former position, I worked with the Rural Infrastructure Fund. And one of the things that we always encouraged people to do was when they were planning their projects, whether it was road work or water and sewer, we encouraged them to think about things like broadband before they dug. We were very, very much into the dig once methodology of economic development. So that point is absolutely well taken.
All right, friends. Anyone else?
Yeah, Katie, this is
Chris, I can't hear you. You're real muffled.
Your audio is very static.
Is this any better?
No.
Can you put it for me, Chris?
No.
Chris, if you can put it and put your comment in the chat box, that would be super helpful.
That's what. Thank you.
And I can get into the very last poll question. Who wants more conversation from us? I know that's a resounding yes. Everybody wants to talk to the Office of Broadband. So if there's anything else, let's see if Chris was able to get his question into the chat here.
Hey, so Katie. Hey, for the next one, maybe do a giveaway of 100 miles of fiber or something like that. Maybe that'd be a great way to do it.
Man, that would be awesome. That would be fantastic. Okay, so I see here, Chris, thanks for writing this out in the chat box. You need to credential the local teams to assure they are representative. Yes, that's an excellent point. Thank you so much for that. Well, if there's not anyone else, okay, I want to thank DEO leadership for its support and guidance in the establishment of this new office, the Regional Councils Association for volunteering their services and all the coordination activities that correspond with this. Thank you to the planning councils, Emerald Coast. Thank you so much for facilitating the workshop and reaching out to everyone for us and being that arm for us and gathering these regional representatives. I thank the Small County Coalition, the Florida Association of Counties, Florida Internet and Television. Brad, thank you so much. And all of the internet service providers, we really appreciate your support and partnership. All of you, thank you so much. And please email me at katie.smith@deo.myflorida.com if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. And just before we close out here, if anybody is attending and did not register, would you please slip your email into the chat box so we can make sure to get you registered. You won't be spammed, but we will provide your information to Katie to go into this report of all that attended. So that's what we're using it for. We will not sell your information, but hope everybody had a good time and thank you for participating. Thank you, Katie, and hopefully the discussions today were beneficial.
I have a feeling they were very beneficial. We will definitely be talking about this in the future. So, thanks, guys.